Restaurant Salvation, my bailout. Hello all, here's another podcast, and I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think, a subject that isn't really being talked about right now. And I think I have a lot of merit to speak on behalf of this because I lived through it. So right now, we have pretty high unemployment claims. There's this COVID situation going on. And there's also some situation, I think it's dying down a little bit, but there's some like racial riots going on. And I really don't have much of an opinion on that world because I don't live in that world. But I did work at restaurants for well over a decade and come in contact with the working class folk. I mean, I was a working class folk. I still consider myself a working class individual. So right now is a weird thing because the economy's not doing so hot. It's doing really well if you're on top, but if you're on the bottom, according to the statistics, unemployment's not looking good. So I lived through the Great Recession. I also don't have a high school diploma, and my parents were on the lower end of the middle class spectrum. So again, I know, what it's like living in there because here I am today, still don't have a high school diploma, well over a six-figure net worth. I have a debt-free home. What else? Yeah, I mean, I have no other debt whatsoever. My college was paid for debt-free. I'm about to buy my first debt-free rental. It's on the horizon. I could definitely see myself being a millionaire in the next decade or so, just based off my savings rate, not even investments. So I'm doing pretty well for myself considering, I climbed out, and some could say that was privilege. That subject of privilege is kind of a taboo because there's so many different levels. Well, if somebody were to tell me I had privilege, I'd say, well, they have privilege because they got 10 fingers and 10 toes. We could play that oppression Olympics game. There's basically no end. If you've got feet, you've got privilege. If you've got a pulse, you've got privilege. So I don't use that. I acknowledge that I have advantages. I call them blessings that others don't have. But that doesn't discredit my effort. It doesn't discredit my achievements. And that's what I'm trying to say. And nor does it anybody else, in my opinion. If you've, put your blood, sweat, and tears into something and you've failed and failed and failed and failed and failed and then passed, kudos to you. And that's what I'm talking about today. So this isn't a skin color thing. This isn't a class thing. Well, it kind of is a class thing because how can you get out of the bottom if you come into this world with nothing? And I'm going to talk about restaurants because that was kind of my bailout. My work effort also was my bailout, but definitely restaurants. So like I said earlier, we didn't have much growing up, and I remember being like 8 or 9 years old and going to my mom's restaurant and helping her close the restaurant down at night. Now, I didn't go to school. I grew up, I guess evidently we were homeschooled, but I don't know, it didn't really work out that well, so I never had a high school diploma. So the only thing I could really do to get out of the house was to go help my mom at night working at a restaurant. And I was like I said, 8 or 9 or 10, something like that. And I learned that while I was helping others, like I was helping my mom roll silverware, sweep the floors, clean the carpets, stuff like that, typical stuff. I could help my mom. My mom only had, a few tables to clean, so I could help her get done with that pretty quick. So other people would ask me, they'd say, hey, I would help my mom get all her work done, and I'd just sit around while she did the rest of her work that I couldn't do. Others would say, well, I'll give you $5 if you sweep my tables. I'll give you $5 if you roll my silverware. So I thought, well, wait a minute. I can buy some Nintendo games here if I work a little bit extra and clean the tables. And so I did that and started making, like I said, 8, 10 years old, $5, $10, $20 a night, working an hour or two after I got my mom's work done, which obviously she didn't pay me anything, but I didn't ask for anything. But I got to make some money for others and buy some Nintendo games and, other trinkets or widgets that a kid wants. So that was a really cool experience for me, and I had fond memories, and I did that well into I turned 14, which I got my first job working at a fast food joint at 14. And that I didn't like that experience. Well, let me just be honest with you. I never liked working at a restaurant. It was not a fond experience of mine. I never enjoyed doing it. But I wanted money. I wanted things in life. And if I wanted those things, I learned at a young age you have to put in the time. Because my parents just didn't have it. And I think I learned at a young age that if I want something, I got to work for it. And it's got to be within my means because I'm the one that's got to do it. So I got a job at a fast food restaurant. Yeah, it was okay. It kind of sucked. I didn't like it. Money was horrible. Eventually, I got a job, I think when I turned 16, at a casual dining restaurant. And this changed everything. And I was at the same restaurant for a decade. And this is just a chain that I worked at, a regular restaurant that's in every big major city. It's got a bar. It's got a bar in the middle of it. I'm not going to use any names. But any type of restaurant that you've got that's got a bar and chicken wings and beer and they play the sports games, you've got them in your area. So I worked at that type of restaurant, and like I said, I didn't enjoy what I did, but I did enjoy the idea of tips. This was kind of like, I kind of gamified the tip system. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail because I think this is relevant for people who find themselves unemployed right now. So the concept of tips, if you're serving at a restaurant, or I think I also earn tips bussing tables. But if you're serving tables at a restaurant, you don't have a salary. You make like $1 or $2 an hour, and then the rest of your income is based on the generosity of humans. And if you're not from the United States, I don't think this is a concept to you. But what ends up happening is the generosity of humans goes well beyond what most servers in other countries earn for an hourly wage. I could definitely afford to move out of my parents' place serving tables. And it didn't happen instantly. I had to work lots of shifts where I didn't make but a couple bucks. There were some shifts as a server where I worked, an 8-hour shift and I only had $30. That's not a good wage. But that's not a good income for an adult, right? For a young adult. So and I had to do that, but I knew there was hope because I talked to other servers and learned tricks. So I'm going to share some of those tricks in case anybody is working at a restaurant or wants to work at a restaurant, get a little peek inside the box. So the first thing is, it's all about the numbers. Kind of like sales, the first trick I learned was the more tables I could have, table turns, or what they call them, where someone eats and they leave and another person occupies the table. The more table turns I could have, the more revenue that I would sell, like, steaks, burgers. The more revenue I'd sell, the more tips I would have. Even if somebody tipped me 10%, right? Like, let's say I made 10% and sold $100. Well, it's $10. Well, if I sell $200, there's $20. And with the dishes costing $11 to $13 on average, it didn't take much effort for me to sell $100 to make $10. And actually, people would tip me 15 to 20%. Rarely did someone tip me 10%. So it was a numbers game. I learned that right off the bat. How can I get more seats and flip the tables faster? Or if someone's staying a while, how can I get their bill higher? And you can learn, certain tips if you can flip them. I learned to flip them fast by making sure I got their order right and making sure my notes on their order. I didn't use my memorization. If it was like 2 people, maybe I would, but I did take a notepad and I would jot down what people wanted. And I would make sure I got it right and I take extra time to get it right because if you get it wrong, they're sitting there, you got to redo it and they have to sit there longer, and then they don't tip you. So it's a double whammy if you get their order wrong. So I would go ahead and that was one tactic, was to improve the accuracy as much as possible. The second was, as soon as the food would come out, I would ask them if the food looked well, like if it looked exactly like what they ordered, and I would even read it off. And if I wasn't the one delivering the food to their table, then I would check constantly within reason, obviously, that the food was out on the table, or when was it out on the table. And then I'd ask them if the food was taking long, do you want some breadsticks, or do you want some crackers? Because some people get hangry. That's where you get hungry and angry. And trust me, you can tell your manager that this person's food's taking longer than the average, and your manager will probably buy them some breadsticks. It doesn't cost the restaurant very much money to have breadsticks. So regardless, I'd get the food out immediately, and as soon as I got the food out, I would check to make sure that it was right. Do they need any more ranch dressing? Are their sodas full? Stuff like that. And then I would wait 2 minutes or 2 bites. If you work at a restaurant, you may have heard this before. 2 minutes or 2 bites into their meal. I would say, how does everything taste? And that tells you if the fries are cold, if the steak is uncooked, yada yada. You find out something's wrong immediately. And if everything is good, I plop down the bill. And because I need to get the bill higher, I would put it on top of a dessert menu, and I'd say, check out our brownies, or as an example, or we have a new cheesecake, and so forth. So I would do that on top of it, and I would try to have some fun with the adjectives, just to keep things different. If there was any drink specials, I'd always remember to add a beer instead of just a soda, because a beer costs way more than a soda. Don't forget about that one. That's called upselling, by the way. So upselling is a really great way. If somebody's getting like a steak, you could offer, do you want sauteed onions and mushrooms on top of the steak? It's, typically like it's $1.50 to $2, but you do that, over and over and over again, you up your bill. So definitely learn how to upsell and add compliments to existing dishes to get those bills higher. So those were tricks. Those were some tricks of mine. But definitely the 2 minute 2 bite rule was very quick, because if somebody was in a hurry, they had their money right there. Most of the time they would pay. They'd pop out the credit card and they could just leave. And I wouldn't ditch them after they've paid. I'd still, loom around respectfully to make sure everything was good, and make sure they didn't, do they need to go boxes or something like that. That was definitely a good trick to getting people out of the seat faster, or increasing their service. No one's going to be offended no one's going to be offended if you place the bill down. You can say, hey, no rush, guys, just putting this down, just putting the bill down, no rush. You let me know if I can help you out with anything else, and then, just be available to them. That was definitely a big one for me. So another thing that I would focus on is I was non-discriminatory on my serving tables. And I'm going to be completely honest. I have nothing to lose by saying this. Senior citizens and black people aren't known for being good tippers. Go to any restaurant. It's a stereotype, and I can tell you it's pretty average. It's pretty true. For the black people, I don't think it's that true. I think I did have a lot of black people, when they tipped fine. They tipped like normal. There, you'd have some exceptions, and that was my personal experience. But the stereotype of black people and seniors not being good tips totally exists. My experience varied on that one. Seniors, absolutely, they tip horrible. Doesn't mean anything negative about the people, so don't get butthurt, because I singled out someone's race. What was I going to say? But I didn't. I took them anyway, because it was a numbers game for me. I mean, let's just say you got a 10% tip, right, from 2 senior citizens, 2 different tables. If I served anything, was better than nothing. Any senior citizen was better than nothing. They would still tip, even if it was $1 or $2. Well, give me 10 of them, I've got $10 in my pocket. That was the way, and they typically weren't that much effort. So if you have an opportunity, because you typically get like 3 tables, but you can sometimes, if you make the right relationships, you can pick up tables for other people, and other people might give up their table if they see there's a senior citizen sitting there. So that's an opportunity for you to make some extra money. One thing that I definitely learned was learn the busy shifts, the busy sections. So like in any restaurant you go into, there are ideal spots to sit that get busy and stay busy. Do what you can to win favor with the manager and always have those sections. Being a closer also helped me make a lot of money. That's where you close down the restaurant. What happens is at the end of the night, you absorb all the tables, or you and a buddy absorb all the tables. And if it stays busy, not only does the time go by, but serving 20 tables as opposed to 3 tables really does what I said, boosts your income, boosts your gross sales, which, your bottom line puts more money in your pocket. So at the end of the day, how much money did I make? I'm not going to adjust for inflation, obviously, because I'm just sitting in my car doing a podcast. But I could definitely say this. I could work, this is, over 10 years ago, but I could work 32 to 35 hours a week, not even full time, and make $600 a week. That was back then, 10, 15 years ago, making $600 a week was middle class. I mean, I could make $32,000 a year, not even working full time. And I kept this job for so long because of that income. And that was my average, right? So, sometimes I did better, sometimes I did worse. But that was my average. And I was a single guy. I had no other bills. That enabled me why this was my salvation was, that enabled me to experiment with jobs like real estate, jobs I worked at like FedEx, for example. I hated it, but I tried it out. I still kept my restaurant job, but I was experimenting. And then eventually I got into IT, and I could still work IT contract jobs or do some IT freelancing, like fixing virus computers while I was still serving. I could even tell some of the people I was, that were regulars. I forgot to tell you that if you're really good, you get regulars. These are people who come in, who request you because they like your service. They grow a relationship with you, and they'll always tip you extra. Getting regulars was huge. Do your best to. Most regulars that I knew memorized what they would get. They had a routine. I'd memorize where they'd sit, and I'd ask them if they had a preference. So get regulars. That's another tip. But anywho, that job, because the nature of serving tables is that it's flexible. You can pick up Thursday nights. You can give up Friday nights, or the reverse. Because the turnover is so high, and they hire anybody to work at a restaurant. So if you just show up for your shift on time and do your job well, you will gain favor with the managers, which will allow you to get the section you want or get the closing shift that you want. So keep that in mind. Show up on time. If they have a script, you have to say, learn the script, do it well, enjoy it, make fun with it. So that was definitely, that income. That was what I was talking about. The income was a phenomenal income. I kept that job well, because when I first got into IT, I had to work a bunch of contract jobs. And I had a heck of a time getting into IT because, like I said, I didn't have a high school diploma. Most companies, even now, for whatever stupid reason, they ask you if you have a high school diploma. It got to the point where I just started lying. Nobody asked for it, and I don't feel guilty for saying that. I just started lying and saying I had a high school diploma just so I could get a job, get my foot in the door for an interview. And I'm just being honest. I'm just being honest with you. So, because I first got into IT, I had to work a bunch of 90-day temp jobs. And serving tables was good because I didn't have that pressure like, I'm going to lose my job in a month or two. So until I could get employment with benefits, I stayed at the restaurant. And I think there's value in this story and in my mindset because to this day, if I were to lose my job, I have 2 kids now and a wife at home, I would be a bartender in a heartbeat. I would go back to the restaurant in a heartbeat. At my core, I'm still a restaurant server. I don't care about pride or ego. I'm out to make money. I'm out to provide for my family, to do great things in this world. So I think that humble attitude definitely makes me, even in my professional life, even if there are jobs that I have to do, let's say tasks in my career, my 9-to-5 job, I'm not afraid to do that tedious task. I don't know. I'm not below it, because I'm still a restaurant server in my ethos. So that has definitely helped me. That attitude has helped me succeed, I think, because I don't have fear, and people like that humility. I think, that in correlation with living below my means has really enabled me to reach the next level. And maybe there's some mindsets that go along with that. Maybe there's some background, psychology or experiences that made me tough. But I guess I can't go into. I don't even know how to begin that story. But if there's any questions about, how a working class guy got out of the lower income realm, got out of the poverty cycle, let me know if you have any questions. My folks are still living the same life, and even though they're it's so fascinating to look back, because it's nothing negative against them. It's that my philosophy of being debt-free and continuing to educate myself in my career obsessively and live below my means has really helped me climb the level. And looking at my peers who aren't doing so, aren't gaining traction on their finances. And maybe that's not their goal. I haven't asked. But definitely it's something I notice. That's all I have for you. If you've got any questions or feedback, or if this helped you, please let me know. I hope I can make this topic be more concise and helpful in the future. Okay, that's all. Have a good one.